Evening, everybody. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right. How's everybody doing? Good. That's very enthusiastic. All right. So we need a motion to approve the present agenda.
Motion. Second.
Okay. Any questions? Comments? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it is now public comment, and if you remember the last meeting that we switched to the non-agenda public comment. So if you have any public comment at all, it does not have to be based on the agenda for the evening. That'll be later. Please feel free and to address the board. Do we have There she goes.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jen.
Excellent. First of all, I apologize for being a little late on this. I always try to get to the board before our Shakespeare show to thank you for your support and let you know that the show is coming. And I usually hand out some fancy golden tickets, but I got thrown off. I thought you were meeting last Tuesday, and so I apologize. I did not get there in advance, but I really just want to say thank you for supporting our program. It means a lot to our kids that participate in it. I thought we had a pretty fantastic production that we were live at 7 o'clock on both Friday and Saturday night. Had a great crowd on Friday night. I thought it went really well, and I just wanted to say thank you for supporting us.
We heard really good things about it, Mr. Yorio.
I was going to save this for board comment, but I went on Saturday night and I really, really enjoyed the production, and I'm so impressed by these kids. Like I said to Jen, it's like a mini ELA course that these students take to learn. Shakespeare is not easy to follow and to understand the meaning of what they're actually trying to say. But they understood it and they were able to project it. And I was just so incredibly impressed. I just wanted to say that I really thoroughly enjoyed the production and very impressed. Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else for us, Mr. Yorio?
Nope, that was it. I wanted to say thank you and to apologize for not coming ahead of the show.
No worry, we'll get golden tickets next year. Okay, speaking of board comment.
Well, I was lucky enough to be part of the interview team last Friday morning for the high school students, and I was really impressed with the program that was set up and how well the kids handled themselves.
Is this our second year doing this? It's seems to have caught fire in the best possible way. So I think great. Matt, you hit something?
Well, I also went to the Saturday show, Shakespeare, so that was wonderful. Although I think there's another golden ticket opportunity in the spring. Gonna have the musical, but
yeah, right, that's true. Does Jenny give us those?
Yeah, I mean the kids continue to be way more excited than I ever thought would be possible for Shakespeare, so that says something about it. We're doing something right.
Yeah. That's a fun plate.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay. Now for I'll tell you, I'm excited about the next component. I know both these individuals, I'm sure most of us do. And it couldn't happen to nicer people. So may I have a motion to grant tenure to Erica Horton.
Motion.
Second.
Let's race. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
So before we move on, I just wanted to take a moment to pause and congratulate and celebrate Erica's service to the district and her achievement of tenure. So we have a little token of our appreciation for that. And for some reason, we don't have wireless mics, so I wanted to stay here.
All right. I also need a motion to grant tenure to Justin Forrest, high school assistant principal.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Just a note that Justin could not be with us tonight due to a personal commitment. And we'll make sure that we pass along the board's congratulations to him tomorrow.
All right. This evening we have an athletic update. JB is going to provide us one. We have a slideshow.
Just need a minute to bring it up. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, everybody.
Just a disclaimer that I'm a little bit slower than usual because I made the mistake of forgetting my glasses. So hopefully I don't put up my wrong slide.
I'm going to hold that for you over here. Or...
Can you make it that big? All right. And our athletic director, JB, it's all yours.
Good evening.
Hi.
Happy to be here. Just got done with basketball practice, but so athletics. Right now this is day 2 of winter sports that just started. The fall just wrapped up in the last few weeks. The fall, as far as numbers go, or sports offered is on the slide there. We currently offer about 8 to 9 varsity level sports. Some have 3 levels, some have 2 levels. We have 2 levels. Some of it's, mod 9, which includes the 9th graders that could play down at a modified level. But some are just varsity teams, which have been in the past, like tennis and cheer, things like that, golf. They're just varsity level teams. We did have every team filled this year that you see listed, enough to compete. Some were lower numbers than others, but we did have enough to compete. As far as our girls soccer team did pretty well this fall, got to this sectional semifinals game, lost in the Bethune Conference Championship game to Greenville, who went on to move on pretty well in sectional. So ultimately this fall was, a lot of opportunities for the kids to participate in. Like I said, some teams did better than others. As a normal, there's always a couple that kind of go like this. So that's this past fall. This winter right now, which is, these are sports we offer: girls basketball, boys basketball at all 3 levels, bowling, cheer, and boys volleyball. As far as start times, like I said, our high school starts right Monday. High school JV varsity level started this past Monday. Modified starts November 27th, which is the Monday after Thanksgiving. Mods will get going. And numbers for the mods look pretty well right now. Mod volleyball is a little bit low, but that's normal because kids are just figuring out what they want to do. So that's our winter sports right now. Come this spring, these are the sports we plan on offering like we have in the past. Baseball, softball, 3 levels. Like to say, with our baseball and softball, over the past few years, we were able to keep a JV teams numbers wise not many teams in our league to play against because they don't have JV teams. So we pretty much, Scott, myself, with the baseball, softball, create a JV schedule for our kids to play because it's that important for developmental purposes. To usually teams with 3 programs, 3 levels usually do pretty well compared to ones who only got 2 levels because of the developmental phases of competing. Girls track, boys tennis. Boys tennis were decent numbers last year. I'm not sure exactly what numbers look like coming this spring. We'll find out, but there were some younger kids in the middle school who were on the tennis team last year. We'll see if they come back. Then that will kind of be an indicator what tennis is going to look like. But these are the spring sports that we currently offer. You go to the next slide now. Last year, a little recap from last year. As you guys know, our baseball went back, just won the state championship again for the back-to-back years, which again, never been done, back-to-back wise here. Boys basketball had their first ever sectional championship title last year, and they lost in the regional finals, farthest it's ever been. Softball as well went back to the Final Four, won sectional champs, league champ, regional champs, and lost in semifinals. And our girls soccer last year were also league champions for the first time in a while. Right, and I remember that was a big win because the team we beat, Greenville, beat us in the regular season, and we beat them in the championship game, and it was a pretty big win for us. I remember last year for the Bethune Conference Championship. But those are some of the bigger highlights of that happened last year. It was that group of kids the last few years was special in Chatham. They were pretty successful in the football field, baseball field, soccer, all the above. It was a great group of kids that you sometimes don't see come around collectively a lot. Since I've been here, I'm going on year 19, that it was special, on all phases. So it was nice to enjoy, watch them be successful. But that's kind of our highlights from last year. Here's some numbers, like how many on each team for this fall. And last year's numbers in the fall were very similar, give or take, very similar. So you can look at varsity football, which is pretty much juniors, seniors, and 10th graders. Our mod football is mod 9, which is 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. You see our volleyballs had about, they said 10, 12, 10, 10, 14, which is decent numbers, good numbers, because it's only 6 on the court. Our soccers were kind of just above the minimums, 11 on the field. You got 15, 13, 15. So not a lot of subs, but we still, again, with JV girls soccer, there was maybe 3 teams, 3, maybe 4 that had JV girls soccer in our league. So I had to go out and get some more games out of league so those girls could play. Because again, it's that much important to have a JV level program, for your success for your program. Girls tennis was low. We had 4. You need 4 to win a match, but you got to win all 4 of them to win it. So a lot of times we're going in down 3-0 because we forfeit the last 3 points for matches. Cross country, as you know, one of your student representative is on low, right? 4. She was one of the 4 girls. And we had 1 boy. That's, like I said, you need 5 to compete as a team. So we were 1 less away from going to compete to win the actual meet. But individually, it was they can compete, which one of our girls this year, 7th grader, Maddie Waring, just finished 5th in the section meet, qualified for state qualifiers, and then just went out and at the state championship meet, came in 25th out of 101 at the state championship out in Verona. And then she's a 7th grader. She was the only 7th grader competing in the event in her bracket in the Class D range, which I think came as a surprise to her. I think it came across as a coach, that she would, would get to that level because she just had ran that race, that course like through 2-3 weeks before that and shaved off like a minute and some change, which is a lot when you run, so it was great to see that because she just finished that up this past Saturday. Now, or this past Friday or Saturday, Saturday. Oh, yeah, Coach Nichols, cross country. So it was good to see that. 8 with cheer. Golf had a big number this year. 16 golfers. Talked to coach. He's like, I don't know if I can keep 16 again. Going because there's only 6 score. So it was a lot of it they got to practice, you got to do some things. I think 4 to 6 someone could play an exhibition match that doesn't count for the score against other teams. If they can get through them, if the course allows it, that type of thing. But numbers are good. The number was good for golf. So we'll see where that goes. I believe there were 1. We had 1 golfer who was a senior.
Is that co-ed or
That it's boys golf, but we have girls on the golf team. But the girls in the golf team, if they qualify, which we did, we had a girl, Taylor Van Week, qualify for sectionals in the girls' score. She competed in the sectional meet for girls. But yes, we have girls on the golf team. And they're just girls golf in the sections just starting to get going as a team. If schools have the ability to get enough golfers to create a girls golf team and play against only other girls golfers with the different tee lengths and where we drive from. So we did have 4 girl golfers. I think 4 girl golfers. I gave our 1 golfer is 1 senior and it wasn't a girl. Boys varsity soccer had 19. Boys mod 9 soccer, which is 7th, 8th, 9th grade only had 12. So that was they were exhausted after almost every single game because some days they only had 11 with no subs. And that's with no JV program. It hasn't had a JV soccer program in a while because it's just not enough numbers, So that's kind of the fall numbers for this past fall. And again, last year was very similar. You would take a couple. So we will see what next fall looks like.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
Of the kids that just graduated, that group of kids.
Yep.
Did they have the opportunity to play, like, let's say, since they were 8 or 9 together?
Yes.
Because that makes a huge difference.
Huge difference. They played youth sports together growing up. It was baseball, it was CYO basketball,
Two
Top
of
Warner
mine
football.
didn't have that opportunity, and 1 did.
Yeah. They did play together growing up, that whole group. Yeah.
You can see the impact of that on the baseball team.
Yeah.
That baseball team played together since they were 4 years
Yeah.
old,
Yes.
5 years old.
Well, Matt's group of kids, and they didn't have all the way down to 4. They started at 8.
Yeah.
And literally they played together from 8 till they graduated.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge advantage. And again, I think Chatham does well with their youth opportunities, and there's a lot of parental involvement, getting their kids signed up to do things. You go on a Saturday morning over to Krellin and it's mobbed. I mean, there's hundreds of kids out on Saturday morning over there playing soccer.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they're not all ours.
Correct. 100%. They're not all ours. My daughter was on a team. I think I didn't see 1 kid in with the Chatham. And they may have been 1.
Yeah.
For at the 3rd and 4th grade level for that 1 team. But had multiple teams. But I said between Little League and then it's pretty solid. The resources are here.
Yeah.
Fortunately, there's not a lot of kids moving forward based on just they can't come out of the woodworks. So, but that's that. Now, so you go next.
Wait, I have questions about those too.
One thought that I had is, and I don't know if we have one or not, but so I guess it's a question. A lot of schools are doing elementary running clubs. I see our numbers are so low on cross country. I'm wondering if we have an elementary running club, and if not, could we consider?
So there's Chatham Gold.
Yep, I know that they have the
Morris
track and
run-
field,
Yeah,
one,
they
but
do
not
track,
across country.
But the running club, I don't think so. Because it would be through. I think it'd be through the school. I don't think there is a running club anymore. I think it used to be up at the MED. Some years back.
Yeah.
I believe.
I think I remember that at one point. Right.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we could have a conversation with Ms. Reno and see if we get something like that started again. And then the second question I had is with the Krellin, what the numbers were like for us with soccer and tennis. I wonder if Krellin would would be willing to sponsor a summer tennis like they do.
Is it
fall soccer.
Krellin, you said?
Yeah,
Oh, it'd be like a
the
little camp or
Morris,
something?
whatever.
I
Yeah,
think it's a county program, the tennis.
yeah, but it's not. Do we have one? I mean,
Krellin hosts the facility,
right.
but it's a county program, I believe.
So I see. I don't even know about this. Do you have information on this?
I just know that when I signed the kids up one year, it was separate paperwork because it came through the county.
Okay, so I
Even
wonder if
though it
that's
was-
something we could advertise a little bit to see if we can drive some of the tennis numbers up.
I did know when I was talking to Eli Armstrong, who's Deni's dad, who does the tennis, a lot of the lessons, the tennis club. He was interested in bringing doing a summer camp, like a camp, week-long camp here at the school. That we some of us run on other sports just to try to get a little more interest in tennis.
Yeah.
Get some kids involved in it because again, that's like you said, it's not a sport.
It's also worth noting our tennis court is probably way better than what's over at Krellin. And if
Yeah,
someone's
yeah.
trying to maintain a program,
Yeah.
Maybe offering that.
Yeah, I
facility.
mean, whatever channel we go through, I think that's the point about getting them to play early and often is a way to build these numbers up.
Correct.
From the grass, from the ground roots, whatever.
And I do know that there are a lot of traveling teams out of this area.
Mhm.
Just because they run into playing with my grandkids from Boston Spa.
Correct.
Can we go back to those numbers? So we just talked about tennis. Yeah, I guess someone from the town of Chatham could probably tell us what's going on, but I think it's a county thing. Cross country running club's a great idea. When they go to meets, is it modified and varsity boys and girls all on the same bus going to the same location? Is that how that works
For
cross
cross country?
Yeah.
Yes, they go on the same, they start their meet earlier, correct? They start first and then the varsity
So-
runs theirs.
So for that program, clearly, we're doing individual comps, right? Because we don't have the team size. But for sustainability, it's really the collection of the 3 or 4, maybe if we had boys done and modified, that really keeps that running, right?
Correct.
Golf's really interesting. Is that
I
that
mean,
like
we
what
went
grades
through-
are those?
we went through, like I said, only one senior. They were all over.
But it's like 7 through 12.
that's 7 through 12. So what happens is 7 through 12, you get some people want to get involved, and there were some 7th graders on it. There's times where we go through phases where we have 7 golfers, 5 golfers. It happened this year. This is the biggest golfing team that as AD since I've been here. So you just never know when they coming through who wants to do golf, who doesn't want to do golf.
There's no way to split that by demography, like to be like these kids are in 7th grade and clearly they're separate from 12th.
Talking like a modified group.
Yeah, I don't.
There is no modified level golf in our conference.
Okay.
Yeah, there is.
And
there's
I'm
that
not sure
option.
they ever was because they had wanted Chris to play when he was in the middle school. And I just didn't feel comfortable with him traveling on the bus with 12th graders. If Jason had still been there, he would have done it. But that was, the whole thing is you're right when we're talking about putting them on the same bus. That was a concern. And he waited to 9th grade.
Are they playing? How many? What are they doing? They're doing
So I believe they shoot 9 holes.
9 holes.
So usually earlier is fine. They start in August. By the time they get mid-September, some of them can go a little longer than others. So they do 9. I believe the exhibitions they want them to get 4 to 5 holes in if they could. In practice, that don't count, but you're still with another school, playing versus that, but it doesn't really count. It's just more of get that feeling of competing. But 9 holes, and sometimes the front 9, sometimes the back 9.
That can take a while.
Yes, that's why they usually go out 4. They go out like the 1 and 2 go out versus the other 2's 1 and 2, and then the other 3 and 4 go out with the other 3 and 4, and they just when they go out, you're at this hole to start, you're at that hole to start, and they keep track of their own score. It's all on the moral, ethical part of it all. Coaches are there just double checking, the kind of just overseeing, but it kind of runs itself,
Mhm.
you know, when you got the golf course.
So I wanted to, you mentioned a note about, I guess you're concerned about sustainability on some of the soccer teams, particularly with the three levels there.
Yeah, well, it could be, yes.
So we'll see where that goes in the next couple of years. I am totally uninformed, and I'm hoping that the district can help me here. I'm hearing parts of New York are collapsing into co-ed conferences, and is that I don't know like what's going on, but
Nothing from the section as it brought to our attention about competing as like co-ed. Now there's always some opportunities that happen where if there's no boys soccer because you don't offer it. Like just say that school has never
Yeah.
had boys soccer and there's always been
Yeah.
girls soccer. Boys can play on the girls soccer team in New York State. Obviously, there's approval.
Does that work both ways?
Yes.
Girls can play on
Yeah.
boys.
You can listen. There's a girl at Bethlehem right now who going to North Carolina for soccer. The last few years have declined to play on the girls team and plays on the boys team for Bethlehem.
so the reason
And that was a choice. That was parental signed off because she wanted to play versus some better competition to get her ready to go play in the ACC for soccer.
Yes.
Well, I'm just thinking we have sometimes competitive teams.
Yep.
And as we're looking at declining enrollment here, we can collapse the program down into fewer levels, which you're saying is not great for the development of skill development.
Yep.
Or some schools are collapsing because they're losing sports enrollment or for a number of reasons, right? There's social reasons too, but they're combining children. We'd be sustainable for quite a long time if we had to do that. I just don't even know if that's happening in this part of New York.
I know we as ADs in our conference, when the ADs brought up potential, like I said, maybe merging boys tennis and girls tennis or something
Right.
that's not the competitive contact and the physicality part of it all. If it meant to, like, you're not going to be able to have a team versus if you combine them, you can have a team. But again, it's kind of the whole conference is kind of in a very similar ability with some numbers and filling teams and low numbers. So it's one of the things at the sectional level. Again, they call it small school problems. You know, decent enrollment, then they don't have their numbers aren't changing. They're gonna fill teams, you know, but smaller level schools, you know, this is kind of some of the things that we have to manage and try to navigate, you know, with numbers.
Well, I love the number overview. I hope that we get to see, I guess, the other seasons. I would love to, so we can get an idea of the whole year at some point. That'll probably take us a year, right, to collect. But
Yeah, I can get you. Like I said, I can get numbers for South. I can shoot them out to you for winter and probably like
we'll see.
I'll wait till mods are complete. So probably sometime mid-December, I can probably get you the official numbers, who's how many on each level, things like that, competing wise. I plan on doing that anyway for the league because again, it's with this enrollment going lower and lower. I want to start tracking it and starting to see trying to be proactive, I guess you can say, rather than what do we do now? Type thing. Which the last slide is kind of, as you guys know, there's low enrollment in our younger levels, big time. I mean, right now we're at the luxury of having 97 in our sophomore class, which is a big class. And then we're talking, I think 71 or something like that is our next biggest class in the whole district, as low as 48s and 50s in the lower levels. Again, we've never been that low since I've been here. When I first was here, we were a decent size B. Number wise, and it's getting lower and lower and lower. What does that mean for Chatham is the question. And again, we have pretty good numbers as far as with even a little bit, you know, declining enrollment, our kids participate. They sign up to do something, which is great. It's more of now, will we have enough to fill some teams is the question. And again, there's all over the place. Teams like us, our schools like us are looking at avenues. If it's, like you said, potentially merging boys and girls, if it's merging with a local district to fill a team so kids have opportunities. all those things are, could be on us in the future or in the near future, just to fill teams, just to be able to give kids here those opportunities to participate in those sports. And that's kind of what we'll be tracking, seeing what numbers are. And, I being in the middle school PE, I see these sixth graders, I'm talking to them, what do you play? What do you plan on playing? So I have some of that data, so I'm moving forward to next year. And just kind of saying, okay, we might be okay here. You know what? We might have a problem in this to fill here, and just kind of go from there. Because again, this is a very common thing in our conference, like our conference alone, filling teams.
I
So
think it's also something that Jenna brought up when she first started with us, was getting more and more involvement from students and into the class and stuff like that. So, it might be a cultural component that I know we're exploring some of it to a degree, and hopefully we'll be able to expand some of that in all things, sports as well as other aspects.
I have a question about just how would that, like, what would that look like as like some sort of merger, just in your mind? I'm just trying to understand.
So I'll just give you like a merger is when you combine, say, with another school, just say basketball, right? Just say it's basketball because you figure you got 6 kids signed up, another school's got 7. You're like, this isn't next year the same numbers, you look for, you're like, it's not sustainable. Like I just say Berlin and New Lebanon did. Like Berlin and New Lebanon merged with every sport there is now. They're combined. They're one now. They're not 2. Initially there were a couple sports. Now they're all together because they.
Yeah, and only I think it's 740 or something like that for Berlin.
So they're very. You went to, so they're very. So they felt like for sustainability, we're close enough where we can we'll combine, give kids opportunities to play, fill teams on top of the competitive balance nature of it all.
Yeah.
Because at some point you're like, oh, we could fill a team, but we're going to go out there and get beat 75-2. It's like, this isn't good either. Like it's a negative effect on top of it, because then you lose kids because they're like, I'm really not going to play. I'm not going out to get. So it's like you always try to have that little bit component to the competitive balance. Does it make sense for us to be a little competitive about it? Then you go. So it's kind of, there's a lot of logistics probably. There's a lot of logistics of who's practicing, where you practice, who's responsible for this, who's responsible for that week. And those are all things that, like I said, we're not there yet, but we could be, very soon. It's kind of a lot to be unknown still to us.
I can say that from because I was 6 years in Berlin and from all through that process. The first thing is the culture, and the kids didn't mind so much. The parents did.
Yep.
The parents fought against it hard. They were going to lose their identity. We were playing with a rival, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Heard all those conversations. Once we did start playing, and we started with soccer. Once we started playing with soccer, the kids enjoyed it, and that brought the parents along. They liked being a little bit more competitive. They liked having a team where they could get a sub on occasion. The transportation then became the big thing. And then I know that the last stage of there was a few other things in the middle there. Who was going to coach, and what do you do with your coaches and their coaches and this sort of a thing. They put a lot of money into a field. I'm not sure that they got exactly the field that they were looking for. I think they got it without the lights, but in general, it was a decision to where to play, and then transportation, and then finally, I think they just adopted a brand new mascot with new colors, and that's 7 years into a process. So it can be done. It takes a lot to do. It's a long conversation, and I think from my experience, the more transparent you are with the folks going in, the better it is in the long run.
And, as you've mentioned, several teams regionally and across the state have gone through that process. So should we embark on a similar process, we would certainly reach out to our colleagues and find out some of the do's and don'ts and learn from their trials and tribulations. Was it Mechanicville and Stillwater
Mechanicville and
or
Hoosick Valley
Hoosick Valley? Okay.
merging. I mean, football as a whole. I mean, it seems like every team's two schools together nowadays. Tamarack, Hoosick Falls combined. Yes, Tamarack, Hoosick Falls combined. And listen, that was an opportunity. Hoosick Falls was brinked off of. They were like one of the most dominant teams in Section 2 in football. They won like 56 straight Section 2 games, and they decided to go merge with Tamarack, who was bigger than them school wise, to get to sustain their programs.
Yeah.
Because they knew that, like I said, they had some 10th graders on varsity who had no business stepping on the field because they were forced to, because there was no JV. They were, they say we were losing kids, things like that.
One of the big things that I remember gave us in Berlin a little bit of a nightmare, a little bit of a headache. So just to put it on your radar, just for consideration for theory at this point, action or practice later on, was the code of conduct. The athletic code of conduct has to be exactly the same, and the expectations at both schools have to be exactly the same. And if it's not, that becomes nightmarish because it becomes harder for coaches or players or parents or the district administrators to actually manage the everyday on something like that.
Good point.
It's not easy, is it?
No, there's a lot to it. I mean,
There is,
you know.
there is.
but hopefully,
Hopefully it won't happen.
hopefully we won't have to. But
Like I said, it's again, if we'll look into it all. We would my thing is that I will be as proactive as possible to do what we do to maintain programs. Like I don't want to be caught in a situation like some schools have where they're folding teams mid-season and we're going out there and saying, well, why did you knew this was going to happen? Why do we wait till it actually happened? And now we're trying to figure it out in the 11th hour, which is sometimes is.
so along those lines, we got 31 on football. What's your number? What's your panic button?
Well, that is 10th, 11th, and 12th graders.
Yep.
You had a pretty strong modified.
They were decent.
Yeah.
They were 9th grade heavy.
Yes, they are ninth grade.
11th, 11 out of
Yes.
those 20 were 9th graders.
Yes.
Yeah. But what's the number? 31.
If you're looking at that football, if you're looking at a football team, you're looking at 30 as a solid number. 11 on the field, but practicing, got injuries, you got all the things that you just naturally is going to happen in that kind of sport. The modified football team this year is great to get numbers every single day.
Uh-huh.
It was, again, on Wednesday talking to coach. I don't know if I'm have enough to play tomorrow because you need 16 suited to play. There's 20 total, 16 suited people to play on the field. Like you can have only 11 on the field, you can't have 12. Like that's the one you got to have 16 bodies.
Yeah.
Refs, there's 16 we can play. And we were getting 16, 17, 18. Again, that was 20, and we ended up managing getting through the season, but it wasn't easy. It was, between sicknesses and injuries, it was, I only got 18. Oh, this kid ain't in school this week because he's sick. And you're like, oh, we're down to, there's kids, 10, 12, 13 kids at practice. You're like, what do we do at practice with 12 kids on a football team?
So those numbers look pretty much. We might be able to go a little bit lower on varsity, but not a whole lot.
Listen, looking at because 11 out of those 20 were ninth graders, which means they're not eligible to play modified. It's going to be extremely hard to have a modified football team.
What do we have going on with Pop Warner? Do we know?
6 kids. I got those numbers too.
What about girls soccer? We got 15 on the team. I know you need 11 on the field.
Ideal soccer. When I talk to coach, it's like 18. It's kind of like when you talk to coach, we got 18. I can sub. We can practice. We can do things, but sometimes you just got what you got. You're trying to maintain programs. Like we could have got rid of the JVs, made a bigger varsity, but then you lose a lot of kids not getting field time. They're not playing. They're not developing, and they're not ready to play varsity.
Right.
So JVs is always, if you can maintain 3 programs, those are the programs that probably will sustain longer than the others.
Okay.
Because when you go down from 3 to 2, at some point it's going to catch you. It's going to catch up. So, and I think we're getting close to that catch up.
And we know we're
About
at
4
the,
years ago we lost JV football, and I think we're starting to. Well, we didn't lose it. We had no one to play against.
Right.
We just was getting called on a Monday at 2:00. We can't play today because I don't got enough kids in school today to play it.
Right. So
we had to go the other route to go to Mod 9. So it was scheduled to guarantee that we had teams that we could go play. So it's getting close to being here in some sports about sustainability because
we're already there with varsity tennis. And we're close to that number of 18 with varsity soccer boys.
Correct. There was 3 seniors. There's 16 left, right? 16 returning there was only 1 ninth grader on the modified team.
When do you start doing survey interest for the players?
I have them on class, the middle school. So I'm always talking to them about them. I'm seeing kids who potentially don't play, like, hey, you should play. They're getting pushed to try to do something because I see them in the phys ed setting. So and they're like, oh, I play this. I can't wait to play that. So I kind of know. So I'm hands-on with them, seeing, and if there's kids who should be playing, I'm in their ear like, listen, you should be doing something. Like you don't think you're athletic, but you are. Like you need it, So every season I'm constantly talking about the upcoming season. Who you're gonna play? What are you gonna play? I've already talked to 6th graders about what they're gonna play in the fall next year. What are you gonna want to play? Oh, I'm girls volleyball. Oh, girls soccer. I'm a football kid. And then I'm jotting them down so I know looking ahead, because I know the enrollments it's caught us. It's slowly got us in the middle school right now with numbers in certain sports.
Okay.
Mr. Stead sitting over there, put me in, coach, put me in.
Any more questions?
So just
we know your heart's in it.
Oh, yeah.
We know your
Appreciate
heart's in it, and we thank you for that.
Thank you.
rest assured, even as early as this week, Mr. Chetty, Mr. Thorson, JB, and I are going to meet, and we're going to keep on top of some of the programs that we have some concerns about and put our ears to the ground in terms of potential for the future. And we'll certainly bring that back to the board, and we would have a very transparent discussion in the future in terms of where we want to go with our programs. So JB, thank you. Well, you said about early December, mid-December, you can forward me some winter numbers.
Yeah, like I said,
and I'll forward those to the board, and then we'll start a spreadsheet so that, like, as you said, historically, we can take a look at fall, winter, spring over the course of a few years. So
yes, I said I can do that to you. I said I probably have to modify to have their team set first week, probably mid-December, obviously before Christmas, 100%. You'll have some numbers.
And then a shout out to Jenna again for being on our cross country team, because as I saw that photo that we shared on Facebook of our 7th grader, and you look closely how cold it was on Saturday and how red she is running in, shorts and a tank. I was like, yeah, I'm glad you guys are doing that.
I wonder if it wouldn't be if it isn't appropriate for us to maybe have. Well, let me ask the question first. Do we do an open house for sports?
What do you mean by?
Oh, we talked about. I think it was early this year or late last year. Talked about doing a sort of an expose for parents in the community to come in, see what kind of clubs we have and what kind of sports I think we're focused on clubs at the time and academics, but maybe also sports. Like, should we have a community outreach component to?
So kind of expanding on the club fair that we have for students,
right?
But potentially have that in an evening where parents can join them.
I would, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the parents that bring the kids, right?
Are you thinking to connect that to the beginning of the school year, or to do it around sort of sign up time for the season?
I would think sign up time for the season, or maybe a winter thing. I mean, it gets dark in the winter. People like to get out of the house, but they don't want to be cold. So,
Jenna, any insight into that? Like in terms of, as Mr. Hutchinson said earlier, one of your kind of goals was to improve participation. Would you see us having an evening or an event where we would explore opportunities both maybe academically and athletically as being something that would be of appeal.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that because I feel like a lot of people, like especially cross country, a lot of people don't know that it's even a sport. So that's kind of why we have low numbers. I also think people see 3 miles on like rough terrain is very daunting, but I think that getting like some of these sports out there like tennis and the ones that we have less participation for, I think would be good because we could have coaches kind of talk about it more so people would have a better understanding of what the sport actually is instead of just hearing from outside perspectives.
Okay, we can bring that up as a talking point. You know, just a quick shout out because just a thank you to all of our coaches, both paid and volunteer, because without them we wouldn't be able to put these teams on their courts and on the fields and on the courses. So we greatly appreciate that. I know there was a time where, and I do see the sign, you know, we need a modified basketball coach or volleyball coach. There's times where we struggle to fill those positions, but over the past year or so, we're kind of holding our own. So that's important too, because we can have teams, but if we don't have people who are willing to coach and give generously of their time, we're going to be in trouble too. So
100%.
shout out to our coaches.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Your day is finally over.
Yeah.
Thanks, JB.
Thanks for staying the extra half hour here. Forty.
Thank you.
Okay. Report from, stay with Jenna, report from the student representative.
So I just want to start with some of the past events that have recently occurred. First is I want to talk about Powder Puff. I think that went really well. I was able to participate in it. It was very cold, but overall I think it went well. The juniors ended up winning, so but it was fun to watch and be a part of. Also, I really enjoyed the senior interviews as well. I thought that it was really enlightening, at least for me, and I think for a lot of the other seniors, they said theirs went very well. We all had positive things to say about it. Because a lot of us have never had that interview experience before. So to be able to have that and then afterwards have the panel with all of the interviewers was very helpful. And I think that it was a overall good experience for all the seniors. Also over the weekend, I had the opportunity to be able to go to the cross country states and watch Maddie run. It was also very cold that day as well, but she did very good and she got 25 out of 113. So she did very well, especially for her first year. So again, being able to get cross country out there would be really cool because she hadn't even tried it before and then she ended up doing very well in it. So I think it's good to promote these sports that people don't know a lot about. I also heard that Shakespeare went well over the weekend. I wasn't able to attend, but I've heard a lot of positive reviews. I've seen things on social media. It looks like it went very well. And they also have another performance on Sunday in Lenox for their fall festival. So that's coming up as well. In terms of new things that are coming up, we also have student government starting up the Krispy Kreme fundraiser that we do every year. It's usually pretty successful. So I'm hoping that it's successful this year as well, because it's good. We need to raise some money for, I think all the different grade levels.
I think the board members are obliged to buy from you, so.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I've had Krispy Kreme that often, but they look pretty good, I think. Also, the student newspaper is starting up as well. I think they're going to be working with student government. I don't know how many people are part of that currently, but that should be a good opportunity for people who want to start working on the newspaper. I don't know if we've had that before. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that report cards are coming out the end of the week for CHS. So that's something that's.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Okay.
I have a question. This is maybe the wrong meeting, but the idea of a student newspaper is super old.
Hold
And
that
I'm
thought.
wondering
I'll come
what it looks like these
in my
days.
report. So you good. Hold that thought for about 2 minutes
All right.
and I'll answer it for you.
Did you say you had your student government elections?
Yeah, we've already had those. So we've
Well,
been.
It's sort of a tradition if you can possibly bring them here so to meet them, your
Okay.
officers.
Yeah, I think I did hear them talking about that. So I could always bring it up to them when we have that meeting this week about coming in and having the officers.
Okay.
Deb's making a note of that and we'll reach out to Mr. Thorson and Mr. Forrest and we'll arrange that.
Might be nice around the holidays too. See the kids. Okay, thank you, John. And now it's time for the superintendent's reports.
With a nice segue from that. First of all, I think there's a board policy that the superintendent is supposed to taste test those donuts.
Yes.
So just so you're aware of that, just make sure they're safe for everybody. So you brought up a really relevant point. Justin Plasky, who is the advisor for the newspaper, had contacted our office, and she was driven by two things. One, the thought that not many papers print newspapers anymore, or print less frequently. And also the fact that I don't think we gave the newspaper a budget. So it necessitated a conversation, but more along the lines that that's not how people get their news anymore. So some of the conversations that occurred from the student level were, well, could we have a social media presence? Could we have a web presence? And so Adam, Jess and I met because we have a tremendous resource right within the district, a communication specialist who was, I want to say, a former journalist, but was more of a traditional journalist early in his career. And I love when we can pair some of internal expertise with the students. So we've made a connection, and we are going to, and obviously we want to be sensitive to concerns over social media and the use of a website. But if we do it, what's the word I'm looking for? If we do it, sorry, substerity.
Is that the 2D compliance?
No, just as much as do it so that we can protect everyone involved, right? So we are looking at having an Instagram appearance for the newspaper and a web version of it. So hopefully we are moving with the times, and this will be a way that our students can publish their work in a format that they can share with each other more readily and more in line with the way people consume information. So that just occurred at the end of last week. So more to come on that. We'll certainly share the links. But I was really pleased to know that that's the way the students were thinking, because that's the world they live in. So I hope that kind of.
All right, I'm gonna raise the stakes for
Okay.
you then. I would challenge our new business teacher to think about how they can tie that to some type of inbound marketing curriculum.
I think that's really a cool interdisciplinary connection. Yeah.
That might take a while
Yeah,
to figure out.
but I think the vision in terms of potentially,
It kind of fits those long-term goals we were kicking around too.
you know,
So,
back in the day when I was on my high school newspaper, we solicited advertising and to support the publication, stuff like that. So we'll have to look into whether that's a possibility, right? Even if it's just community-based promotion of things. So a lot of exciting.
Sports and theater as two things that
Yeah.
need to be promoted. So
And we already have that, the theater production class. It's a wonderful connection between our arts and our business program. So good idea. Very good idea.
I love this whole idea because we also wanted more student voice.
Mhm.
And even if there's a blog section on it, of just a featured blog of just thoughts or whatever. I love this concept.
Mhm.
I think they need to have a voice. We have on our website, we have teacher pages, we have all these other things on our website. We could easily probably add that link to the student newspaper of, whatever
Yep, absolutely.
newsletter it was. I think it's a fantastic idea.
I think the concept's going to evolve quite nicely. So a shout out to our students and our advisor who've brought that to life. We've mentioned it, but just again, a shout out to the senior team who for the second year organized the mock interviews. There was actually a conflict that morning. I actually popped in to see how they were being kicked off, but we also had the middle school Veterans Day celebration, which has been a wonderful, it's an event that I look forward to each year. The middle school under Mr. Fortran's direction did a wonderful job again this year. And also there was a veterans celebration at MED as well. And what I'm going to do now is turn it over to, we don't have an academic update for tonight. You're going to have a pretty detailed academic update at the next meeting. That's where Dr. Rude will be and the principals will be in focusing on some of our academic achievements and data from this past school year. So we're going to take her time and send it over to Mr. Chuddy, who's got a few things to share with the board this evening. Which do you want to do the calendar first, or do you want to?
First, I'll just talk.
Okay.
Couple things we'll discuss tonight, but one of the things, Sal just wanted me to give a quick update on the NISBA conference. So I went to Buffalo with Dawn. Dawn's here tonight. So I went down, I never went to the law conference, so I thought that was great. I actually went to the law conference all day Thursday, and I went Friday morning, then I headed out to Notre Dame for the weekend. But on the law conference, just one of the things I thought was interesting, just for the board and for the district, I talked to Sal about something that's actually being heard by the Supreme Court. It might have been heard October 31st. I haven't heard a decision yet, but they brought up social media with board members, administrators, the school. They're focusing on the board members that. And I thought it was kind of interesting. They had a case in California where 2 board members were running, and they used their Twitter, their Facebook. They were promoting, running for the board. They were elected to the board. And then this was their personal accounts that they were using. And then they continued to talk about board business, solicit opinions on things. So obviously what happens, you can do that. We wouldn't recommend that. But what happened was then someone, then the public, someone was writing 200 notes a day, real mean notes, about the school, about the board member. So the person blocked that person. Well, unfortunately, once you start doing that, you open up, you're treated like a government. So it's free First Amendment rights. So by doing that, it's called viewpoint discrimination. You're not allowed to delete comments. You can't do any of that stuff. So that went up through the courts and they lost. And it's right at the Supreme Court now. And then you're talking attorney fees, that person's going to be, the board member will be personally liable. It's not covered by insurance. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But on our websites too, they were talking about, we can't really take comments off. I mean, they have to be really, really bad. And we'd have to ask our lawyer. You can't really, people can have their opinions and you can't really do much with that if you open it up for comments. So let's say we had our website, we had our Facebook, we had comments. Let's say we were getting some bad comments. We can't just shut it down immediately either. So we would probably have to say in 6 months, we're going to stop comments, because then that's where you get yourself in trouble. So I thought that was quite interesting on both pieces. And like I said, that went up through the court. The other thing that I would just want to talk about, I went to the EV buses. I'm very happy we actually started that process, because there was a bunch of board members asking, there was hundreds of questions. First Student was there. They operate in 39 states, 46,000 buses. And they said right now the buses can cover about 80% of routes. So we talked about rural places. It's hard to cover because of the distance. So we're really not there on the technology yet to do a total overhaul. Obviously, they say you start with your shorter runs. The assumption is that the power and everything is going to get better in time. But the main thing they talked about, which we've been dealing with and trying to work through, is, the utilities. They got to be involved, because you're not going to have the power to do this. So that was the big thing. And then it was interesting. They said about your footprint on where all your buses are. Well, someday when you have to have, if it's going to be all EV buses and everything's you might not have the space. So you really got to be careful with spacing. And they did talk about the fires, it takes hours to put them out. So they actually have locations where throughout the country, they have these, they use EV buses. They have on the bus site, they would have a place where the bus would be basically to let it burn out, with a fire. To be away from everything. So there's a million questions. I am happy we got some funding, because most of these districts didn't even start yet. And they were like, how are we going to get money? And how, because the cost is, triple. So like I said, we're still in that process where we sent it to state ed for the utility piece. We're waiting, we're got to get approval on that. We're still into next, probably later this year before we even start doing this, but I'm happy we're starting slow, obviously, but we are starting. So I thought it was a good conference. It was, it's nice Dawn was able to go. I think it's a good event for the board and the administration to attend. So that's that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Could you go back to that, when you were talking about the comments on Facebook, et cetera, and what we would be liable for?
So you're liable if you allow comments. So let's say we allow comments on Facebook, and let's say we start deleting comments. We don't like what someone said. Let's say it has to be pretty bad. Like if you put obviously pornography on there, you could take that off, but pretty much got to ask your lawyer. But if someone has opinions, they hate the school, someone writes hundreds of comments, you can't delete that user or take those down. If you do that, it's considered viewpoint discrimination, and we're a government, so it violates First Amendment rights, free speech. And then you get sued. And then, like I said, this goes up the courts, and then you're paying attorney costs. And
you can moderate them, but the rules are, you have to be very careful with. They're-
You'd have to get, yeah, because
Yeah.
they said it's pretty hard to take almost anything down. Because it's free speech. I mean, that's,
If you
Like
start to welcome it.
threatening or something.
yeah, threatening but you still have to go through there. They basically said pretty much what people want to say, they can say. The hate speech or like he said, pornography, that's what he said. Other than that,
Yeah.
it's really difficult because then you can get in trouble.
And that's why, we have reinforced on this board a number of times that we speak as a unit and we refer to the administration.
Yeah.
Because if we start doing it on our own personal sites, it's not the board that you're not acting as the board at that point in time. You're acting as an individual and therefore you're liable.
And I think
fees,
where it
lawyers
comes in,
are all
I think
yours.
where it comes in with the board is you could have a Twitter, I kind of see the thing like, I have my Twitter or my Facebook and hey, community, what do you think of this thing we're trying to do at the school? Just trying to gather input.
You're
then-
talking about board members.
Well,
now.
school also.
both.
School's a
Both.
government.
It's schools, but the school thing extends to your personal social media if you use the personal
business,
social media
Yeah, you
for
have
the
to,
school.
you have to broach the subject
Yeah.
on your personal media. If you do broach the subject of school board business on your personal media, you are now speaking as a government.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
So
You don't have to worry, Muriel, because you're not on social media.
But I am on the school Facebook.
But we've had that consideration of what types of comment do we want to allow and what platforms do we want to allow it on, and
Yeah.
we've never really finished the discussion. I think we live at a time when not having the ability for people to submit digital comments to us is unrealistic. And we do want that facility. We want to be able to receive things that way, but we can choose which platforms and
It's an interesting coincidence maybe that we were talking, that you brought up the idea about the school newspaper and how to make this, a modern sort of contemporary process. And, since we want the kids to have real life experiences, we may have to start with a very strict policy around that. If it does go digital, that it can't receive comments. We might have to start that way and learn our way through it.
I don't think that those government rules would apply to a student created and student.
we better find out
Sponsored
because,
Yeah,
by
we should
Exactly.
definitely
because
have
the
a-
Sponsored by
cost,
the
the
school
cost
of
for
it,
these
yeah,
people that are
governmental.
getting the board members, it's astronomical what they're gonna have to pay.
But I mean,
And the district would be liable too. If we get, we're liable, we're gonna pay lots of money.
if the students write all the content and it doesn't belong to the government.
But if it's on our website, it is.
Well,
It would be a club.
yeah, we'll
Yeah,
we'll get that through
Consult the
legal.
lawyers. It would come
Review
up.
with the lawyers.
We anticipate at this point it being a separate website that we link to.
Okay.
And a separate Instagram that we link to, that will be moderated by the advisor to ensure that, we're meeting certain journalistic standards, for what's published.
Mhm.
And I don't envision at this time that there would be, the capacity for people to comment. This will be kind of a one-way
Yeah, like
distribution.
a
And I-
traditional
I
newspaper,
wouldn't
you don't
want
get to comment
have
on it.
that, and I want the students to feel safe
Mhm.
to print and not have to deal with any.
Right.
That should be completely.
learning experience
protected.
for the kids.
Absolutely, yeah, no
The,
comments.
the idea of actually having a choice on the comments is actually not, that's actually not an option, because when people write something on the internet and they copy that URL and they post it into any of like 10 different social media platforms, there will be comment threads everywhere and they will be outside our control. So we just need to be aware that that's not something we have control over.
And the other two items, so I want to go through the budget calendar first, and then we'll talk about these new tax exemptions that we discussed in Finance Committee. We had a meeting last Thursday with the committee.
I don't think we got the budget calendar.
It should be attached to the,
We have the slideshow, but not the budget calendar.
It's under-
is it under Mike's,
Should be under
Oh, is it?
consensus
Okay.
agenda, yeah. So as we met, I don't know, this is my 12th year here, so we pretty much follow a similar pattern on the budget calendar. We met to establish the calendar dates. They pretty much follow a certain pattern based on deadlines that we need to meet for the state. As you can see, and then the thing that we've done since the first audit in 2015 is we have the reserve plan that we're going to review on November 29th. We'll meet with the finance committee to go update the finance reserve plan. Then I'll present it here on the 12th for adoption. That's to meet our comptroller's recommendations from 2015 and kind of talk where we are financially in the school district. I talked to the committee, our reserves are solid. We're going to be going out for debt next spring. We want to keep our high rating so we pay much less interest on that project. And then we really start this year. Usually it's end of January, but February 1st, the way it falls with the dates, which is good because I'm always waiting on those state aid numbers for the executive budget from Hochul. And those usually come the last week of January. So the first we will meet, talk about state aid. And I also talk about the retirement system rates with that and just in finance. And I'll talk about that later with the board in a later meeting. Then we look at the state aid at the board meeting on the 13th. And then the 15th, we'll do the tax cap because that's due at the end of February. And we'll talk about the first part of the budget. So we talk about administration, operations, the property tax cap in phase ones. And then we'll follow a similar pattern. 7th, we'll go through the second part, instructional, library, and cafeteria. I might sometimes, depending on the library, I might move that up or down a meeting. And then on the 21st, finance, we'll talk about transportation benefits, special ed, the third part. Then we wrap everything up on the 28th to adopt on the 9th, which is well ahead of time when we need to adopt. We usually try to wait for state numbers. If it's imperative that we have those and they're not in, we could move it a meeting one more, I think another week if we had to, but we try to keep that schedule. That way we can get everything ready and out to the public end of April. The hearing's on the 14th and the vote is on the 21st. Pretty much similar to what we've done. We've done this 12 years since I've been here. It works. The process has worked well. But the other thing we talked about, we spent some time on is there's a couple of new exemptions. And they're time sensitive if we want to get them in for next year. So the first one, so district volunteer firefighter and ambulance worker exemption, EMT exemption. So Governor Hochul signed legislation. It was last December 7th. And then we were hearing about this in January. Dave Laveau sits on the committee. He's a works as a fireman. He brought it up. And the big thing we decided last year in most districts, some did go ahead and adopt it, but we had no numbers. So we didn't know what the impact was financially to the rest of the community. So I was holding off and hoping to get numbers. So we did not adopt it last year. We wanted time over the summer to get numbers. So what this exemption is it gives 10% assessed value property tax exemption. So if your house, let's say a firefighter's house, for firefighters or ambulance workers, if it's 300,000, you could get 10%, so $30,000 off. And this is kind of similar to the veterans exemption when we approved this a few years, I think it was a couple of years ago. We had to have a public hearing, then we adopted a similar process. We have to have a public hearing and adopt this. Usually it's done at the same meeting. That's what the other districts have been doing. The one thing with this firefighter and the senior exemption I'm going to discuss, December 1st is the deadline.
Are these all volunteer ambulance workers?
Yes.
It's all volunteer.
It's volunteer.
Okay.
And the so the deadline is December 1st if it's going to be in for next year. So not a lot of districts did, like I said, another slide I'll talk about who did. But then Ichabod and Taconic and we were talking together if we were going to do this. And I said, so we were going to talk to our boards, have these meetings. So I'll discuss on the next slide that happened. But years of service between 2 and 5, district can decide. Primary residence, it has to be the primary residence of the person, and they have to annually sign off that and get approval every year that they're in this volunteer firefighter or EMT. So the next slide. So who's adopted? So actually, if you look at the bottom, East Greenbush was an early adopter. They did it for last year. So I think we had to do it by March 1st. As I stated, most districts wanted some data before they adopted, but they adopted on February 27th. They did 2 years of service. And then there's a couple other provisions that everyone's adopted that has done this is 20 years of service. It's permanent. So if you work 20 years as a volunteer, you get it you don't have to keep working. You get it permanently. And your surviving unremarried spouse, if they stay in that house, gets that or that in the same, in the district. And then the other one is 5 years unremarried spouse. If they're, if the person dies in the line of duty, then the spouse, if their unremarried spouse would get that, keep that benefit. So East Greenbush did it in February. The county adopted on May 10th. They did 2 years of service, all the other parameters. Skodak was May 16th. They did 5 years of service they wanted. So that was the one difference. Then if you go to the next slide, you'll see Ichabod just adopted last week. So I've been talking with Ichabod and Taconic, kind of in our area, who's looking at this. Hudson's also was looking at this. They did 2 years of service, all the other parameters. And then Taconic is, I think, the 15th, I think it's tomorrow night. They're having a public hearing to see if they're going to adopt 2 years of service, same parameters as Ichabod in the county and East Greenbush. So what does that mean for Chatham? Or what are we talking about if we were looking at this? I was very happy that, that's what took some time. Suzette Boy, who would actually, if we have a public hearing next meeting, she said she could be here to answer questions. She works at Real Property in Hudson, but she lives in Chatham and has, her kids have gone through here, still has a kid here. She worked with the county fire coordinators research to get as much data as possible because we, all the fire halls in every district. It was who's going to be eligible. So we talked through numbers, and she estimated about 154 firefighters will be eligible for this exemption for Chatham. We talked in the finance, if we were looking at this, we'd probably be looking at the same parameters that everyone else did. The majority of the districts in the county, 10%, 2 years of service, 20 years for permanent, and then the 5 years in line of duty death. So what does it mean? So if you take the county estimate, they said to use the district's 317,000, kind of an average. And that's what she recommended that we use when I was calculating the numbers. So if I did a 10% valuation exemption, so if there's 154 times $317,000 a house on average, and you get 10% of that, it's about $4.9 million. And we have about $2.69 billion in our assessed valuation for Chatham in our whole district. So basically what you do is you take that 4.9 million off, and it spreads across the rest of the taxpayers. So what does that mean for the taxpayer? The estimated impact would be 0.22% increase in your taxes if you pulled that valuation, that money out of the total valuation. Remember, because our tax levy, what we levy for taxes doesn't change. We get what we levy. So $100,000 house, we talked about this, it's not realistic here, but it's ease of numbers because the $2.31 it would cost. So you can multiply that by 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can, that's what, times the 231. It's easy to calculate what it would be. The 317, you're talking about 734 would be the impact. This is per year. And then for $500,000 house, we're talking about $11.57 for the year if we adopted this. Next slide. So what does it mean for the firefighters and EMT? A 10% reduction, as I stated, on a $200,000 house. I started there because right now I think they get $200 if they off their taxes, off state taxes automatically. If they choose this, they don't get both right now, so they could choose one or the other. So obviously, if it was less than this, they're going to choose the $200. So a $200,000 house would be $211. 317 would be 334, and $500,000 would be $526 they would save. So that's the firefighter one. I'm going to go through the seniors. Any questions on the firefighter EMT before I
I have some questions.
Yeah, sure.
So I remember reading about this when it was first enacted by the state. I think that the state sets the ceiling on the exemption, right, at 10%, and we can offer up to that. Is that right?
Yeah, and when I talked to the county, they said that it's not even set up. If we do something different than 10%, they can't calculate that right now. So they said, if we're going to do it, look at the 10%.
So, but that's the ceiling of what's permitted.
Yep.
And then I think it's up to local option on when to qualify, when to first qualify, right?
Years of service.
Yep.
Years of service.
Yep.
And I'm curious.
2 to 5 is the option. Between 2 and 5
Between
years.
2 and 5. And here's my question. I've talked to firefighters about this, and different districts are doing different things, but they're under a number of pressures right now around the certification requirements have really grown, and the annual training requirements have really grown, and they've had trouble not just recruiting firefighters, but recruiting firefighters that actually complete their training and don't just want to come and get a beer and go to the whatever night. And I think that some feedback from our local fire chiefs on where they want that incentive to be would be really important. They may tell us, actually, we want this to be 5 years because when we want our members to finish their training. And I don't
So the one nice thing to address
Yeah.
is that, you know, it's a representative of that, but Dave Laveau is
Yeah.
a chief. And you know, he was sort of in line with what we were talking about, if memory serves, looking at the 2 years, knowing that the training is extensive, hoping that it draws qualified members to the fire company, you know, qualified volunteers, with people who can actually do the work, and complete the training. So
I have a question about the calculation of the numbers.
Mhm.
If you can go back to that slide.
Sure.
Incidentally, Dave is connected.
Oh, great.
Dave is listening in.
Yeah, so. Well, so the question is, so these numbers, I don't understand how these work. These estimates and what. How much. That's.
Yearly.
No,
There we
this,
go.
so what this is I took, so we have 2 points, so $2.269 billion of full valuation. So this is based off of last year's tax warrant, this school year's tax warrant. So if I have 154, that's an estimate, right? We don't know exactly. They worked with the fire halls to get an estimate of what they thought this was going to be. I don't have a guarantee the number.
Okay.
People also have to apply for it, sign up for it. So if I took the 154 people times 317,000, that's an estimate of the average assessment. I don't know what these fire people's homes are, right? So we're doing an estimate. That's what the county used, and they recommend that we use that. So I'm estimating the house value. Someone could be $500,000. Someone could be 220,000, right? So we're estimating 317. So if you multiply 154 times the 317,000, you get about, and it's 10% of that, right? You're getting 10% of that amount. So $317,000 house times 10% is 31,700 times 154 people. That's where you get the 4.9 million.
Okay. So what I'm struggling with these numbers,
Yep.
these estimates, is that this is a shot in the dark. Do we think that this could be?
No, they researched the fire halls. That's why it took months and months to gather the data. That's what I wanted.
But what I'm saying is, since we don't know what their values are of their homes, obviously.
Well, that's why you're doing average assess. Yeah, you're doing an average estimate of what the home value would be in the county.
So
And it's a ballpark, but it's 0.22. So is it 0.25, 0.20? I mean, it's going to be in that realm. It's not going to be way one side or the other, much higher or lower.
I'm only bringing it up because, you know, when we consider tax impact, you know, for example, with a capital project, you know, we're down to the penny, right? Like we're very specific.
Yeah, and this you can't do that.
Can't do
because
that.
First
So-
of all, if no one signs up for it, there's zero impact. If none of them sign up, it's zero.
Right.
you also have to consider too, Chris, that, you know, some firefighters, as we pointed out, some firefighters may not own the home.
Right.
And so those would be discounted. Others may have had their home for 20 years, in which case and that's a question.
Well, that's where they were
Is
trying to
it based
get
on valuation or is it based on mortgage?
valuation. So
Okay.
your home value,
Assessment.
assess value,
Assessment.
your
Okay.
full value of your house. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as Mike illustrated, if you're close to that threshold where you're already receiving the tax credit,
You're not going to.
you're probably not going to go
Probably,
through the
yeah,
additional
stay.
trouble of an attestation every year and going this route. So there's, you know,
I just want to, you know, I think it's important to just be clear that
And so
it is an
yeah,
estimate.
and we're looking at the ballpark. So you're looking at $317,000 house, 734. So is it $6? Is it $8? I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Mm.
You're not going to see a magnificent switch. I don't think all these people have
It's
$1
not
million
a
homes.
1/4% switch that we're talking about here.
We're not talking, yeah, they're not going to all have $1 million homes that working, you know, they're voluntary.
Mhm.
So that's what that's a good point though. That's why I wanted some data and it took a while instead of just approving this. I wanted to get a ballpark of what are we really talking about? Because those other districts that adopted had no data. They just went with it,
Mhm.
something to do. Because, you know, they want to get volunteers. It's kind of promoting to get people into this because it's hard to hire.
When Dave first brought this up, I've asked a whole lot of people about this, what they thought.
I actually did the same. this
Yeah,
week,
and I don't think I found a single person who thought it was a bad idea.
I found one person who thought it was a bad idea. They're not a resident of Columbia County. They're a professional firefighter. And I don't know if they have bias on the idea of volunteer fire companies versus professional fire companies. I listened to what they said. They brought up some interesting points. But as far as our constituents, the people who send their kids to our school, I couldn't find anybody who is against it at all.
Can we attach this to another referendum? I'm just joking.
And remember, we have to have a public hearing,
Yeah.
just like we did with the veterans. So if we, if we were going to go forward with this, the 28th, we'd have a hearing. We'd open a hearing for this one. We'd close it. And then if we want to do the senior, we would do the same. We'd open a hearing for the senior exemption and we would close it. And then what all the districts have done is then after that, they would vote. They voted on the motions if they wanted
But I
to.
didn't discuss it on my social media. So
Wait, this doesn't need to go to voter referendum.
No, just the board,
Okay.
approval of the board. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
So the next step, as you said, is that we go for a public hearing.
Yep.
Do we have a date in mind, Sal?
We want 28th of November.
On the
Because
20th.
December 1st is the deadline.
Okay.
What we've done as a placeholder, and you'll see this in agenda planning, should the board give us approval tonight to move forward, we would have, as Mike mentioned, 1 or 2 public hearings if we're going forward with the firefighter exemption, if we're going forward with the senior exemption, 2 separate public hearings, and then there are resolutions that would also be later on in that meeting where you would, based on the feedback that you got in the public hearing, if there were anyone who spoke, then you could decide whether we were going to put whether you would approve it or not.
So that's a board meeting night. Is that part and parcel with our board meeting, or is it in advance of the board meeting? Or
No, we generally do it right up front.
Okay.
Should we move on?
So
to
the
social-
senior exemption, we have the senior exemption actually. Almost, I think every school district has approved this. But what Governor Hochul did was they increased the exemption maximum income limits. So if you look at the second actually bullet point, majority of school districts, almost everyone except one has a little different limit. We were at the maximum limits of, if you make up to $29,000, you get 50%. If your income is 65 and over and your primary residence, you live here, you're a senior and you make up to 29,000, you get 50% exemption. We currently have this. And then it's a sliding scale that goes to 37,400 and that's 5%. Actually, if you can go to the next slide, I'll just show what that means, the scale. So this is what so if you make up to 29, you get 50%, 29,000, 1 penny over, just under 30, you get 45, 30 to 31, 40. So you can kind of see how as you make more money, you get less of an exemption. So if you go back, this is our current, and almost every district has this. And this maximum limit though on income has been since I've been here 12 years. So it's been a long time since they've updated this. So obviously with inflation and rising costs, the new limits are 50,000 with a sliding scale to 58.4. And I kind of agreed with the county. I talked with Suzette and what districts that are looking at this, they didn't want to go right to 50,000 to 58.4 because we don't even know what that impact would be. So they adopted 34,000 with a sliding scale to 42,400. We know the impact up to 37,400. So it's a smaller room of air that we're just kind of guessing what that impact would be. So they wanted to start conservatively and then review the exemptions in the future to see if they want to do anything higher, but to start with, and this is what the other districts that are looking at this is they're doing the same thing. Ichabod did adopt the 34,000 with the sliding scale to 42,400. Taconic Hills is speaking on the similar parameters tomorrow. So what that means, if you go to the next one, it just makes instead of 29, 34 is the new 50%. And then you can see how each increment goes down to 5%. If you go to the next slide, so what is this impact? This is another estimate because between 37,400 and 42,400, I'm not sure what that is. But as the income does go higher to that 42,400 members, only 5%, there's not as big percentages. I estimated 0.13 to 0.18. I have a wider range on this because this is much more of an estimate. So what does that mean? $100,000 house, $142 to $190, 317,450 to 601, and then 500,000, $7.10 to 948. So if you looked at these together, you're looking at 0.22, and let's use the conservative 0.18. You're looking at about 0.4% increase. I think similar to what we did when we did the veterans, it was about 0.4.
Sort of at the high number, we're talking about $20 a year for a $5,000.
Yes.
Why is
that
the
4
range?
Starbucks coffees?
Is that what?
4 Starbucks coffees.
No, that's 3.
Why is the range so wide on this one? Is this because the county didn't provide that?
Well,
that
because we
estimate
don't
guide?
know between 37,400, which is the current cap, to 42, that we don't know anything on that. So I was talking with her, we're just trying to do, I put $1 million on top of it. So I put a pretty good estimate, but I wanted to give a range, I could, somewhere in that range it's going to be. And then if you see what does this mean for the senior? So let's use the $317,000 house, the average. Right now, you can see if you're at 34,000, the current scale that we adopt right now, they get $676 off or 20%. So the new sliding scale would be 50% or 1,698. At the higher end, the 42,000 right now, they don't get anything. They would get 5% or $164 on the high, if they made that much money. So a small amount. I think is there anything else? Yeah, so that's what I had for those two.
So my thoughts on these two things. One, I think we're always appreciative. We may forget how important firefighters and ambulance volunteers are until we really need them, and then we're super appreciative of the fact that they are there. So sending that appreciation their way, I think, is a good thing. And the other end of this is, our community is getting more and more expensive. It's harder for people to buy homes, and it's harder for our seniors to stay in homes. But that's the community that we had, and that's how we got to a point where it became one of the finest communities, at least in New York, to raise children. So I know how I'm going to vote, and I'll be voting in favor of both these things after the public hearing.
And then, like I said, I'll have, if we have the hearing, I'll have Suzette Boy from Real Property, in case there's any other technical questions you guys have or anything else, she can be here to assist on that public hearing.
I have a question about the numbers for the seniors.
Yep.
Can you go back to that slide of the benefit? Yep. So it sounds like we don't want to consider higher thresholds because it's difficult to calculate. Is that?
Yeah, I can't calculate. That could be a huge impact to the taxpayer.
Okay.
So I'd rather get information like we did with this and make informed choices instead of guessing. Because we're spreading this against everyone else is paying for it. So I want to be careful with what we're doing.
You could almost see a tiered approach, right? So if you were to institute this scale, then you'd have data over the next year or two up to 42,000, and maybe you go from 42 to 50, and then you gain data from 42 to 50, and then maybe you go to the 58 at some point. But at least you'd be making a better informed decision based on it, rather than a guesstimate on those unknown areas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So what we'll need from you tonight is just after you've had your discussion's completed, is just to know whether you want us to put one or both of the items on the next agenda for public hearing, and then also, and I would think that if we do that, then we would want resolutions for which you could then vote. So
Can I ask for clarification on that senior sliding scale? So the current sliding scale that's already in place today.
That's
right?
correct. That's been in place for a long time.
And
before I was here.
It's the data came from, did something happen at the state level, or this just new data to update our?
Yeah, the state, that's what Governor Hochul created, these new limits up to 50 to, what was it? 50.
No, I was responding to Chris's
58,400.
Why not to move higher? I thought it was just because the state didn't authorize any. Oh, they're up to 50,000. It's up to 50,000.
And the reason the county, and I wouldn't recommend, is we just don't have enough information to know the impact. If we went up to those higher amounts, we can scale this in. I feel comfortable with my estimate on the smaller, unknown, as opposed to a huge unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, just when we reached that age, we kind of got excited, like, oh, we're going to get a tax deduction. Then when we looked into it, we made far too much money to be able to get that tax deduction to qualify for it. And I think the people who are in these tax limits, they deserve it. Yeah. Because they're going to, it's the same thing. We're pushing our young people out, and we're pushing our senior citizens.
I'm in support of the initiative. I was just curious where we chose these numbers from. Because it seems like there's a large range of where we could choose them.
The barrier was the range was from the state, but as Mike
Well, it goes up to 58.
Right, but we took these numbers from the county. That's what the county had.
County adopted and all the other districts looking at this are looking at this right now. They're
But
not-
this is something we could
And
consider.
we're actually one of the front runners, right? No one is in our county has done this. So Ichabod was the first. Taconic and us are really looking at it. I'm not
Yes,
sure if
Chris,
anyone
we
else is
could
going to do
choose
it.
any numbers, but
No,
it could be dangerous.
Right, no, but what I'm saying is annually or how, when we want to as a board going forward, Sal, as you mentioned.
But I don't think we could reel it back.
No, unlikely.
Well, I am in favor of the tiered approach simply because it's a balancing act, isn't it? We definitely want to help out our seniors, but we also have to keep in mind the young families that are starting out with children here and their tax impact as well. So it is a seesaw. It is definitely a balancing act. So getting a tiered approach to see what the impact really is, I'm completely in favor of.
All right. Well, Krispy Kremes to Mike if you got that estimate right.
All right, so do we need a motion on this, Sal, or
No, I think just a general sense from
just
you.
general sense? You
I'm
wanna
good
go
for
around?
you.
I'm in
Scheduling hearing.
support, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Beth,
I'm in support.
Matt,
Yeah, let's do it.
Muriel,
Absolutely.
Marianne,
Yes.
and I am too. So
That's awesome.
let's schedule that.
Consider it done. And I believe that's our team's report for tonight.
Okay, we have Public Library Advisory Committee for Board Committee Reports. Public Libraries first.
Okay. There is no way that I could do a library, but I gave you all in front of you the library director's report. The only thing I'm going to show you, and this is why I cannot report on all of this stuff. We'll be here till 11 o'clock. We had 57 programs in October at our library, and we had 4,235 visitors recorded in October.
Wow.
So this is a busy, busy place.
That's a lot.
And-
That's great.
And all of this, all of these figures and all the programs are in the report.
4,000 visitors.
4,235 visitors recorded in October. Wow.
We'll, Deb, can we get this scanned and attached to Muriel's, to the public agenda under the library report? So for the record, we'll have this.
It's a
Attached
busy,
tomorrow.
busy place. Busy place and very proud of it. Oh, and I would like to have permission from the board to write a thank you note to the Friends of the Library.
Oh, please.
They have,
No, I can't.
I think in this, I think they've spent something like, it's either $6,000 or $8,000 this year for new furniture for the library.
Wow.
It's beautiful. For coffee tables, for chairs.
Yeah.
So I will write a thank you note to the friends from the board.
Any opposition to them?
No.
Okay.
So I haven't seen the chairs yet, but I want I want to relate something related here. So I get calls, so I run the co-working space in town and I get all sorts of calls over there about like strange needs for space, believe it or not. I'm sure the library gets the same type of calls.
Yeah.
I've had two individuals over the last few months that have said, I'm looking for a place to hang out in the village while my kid's at school. Just like a comfortable chair.
We've
And I'm
got-
wondering if such a comfortable
Yes,
chair.
they
There are probably 8 of them now.
Yes, and they're
Yeah.
very comfortable.
Okay.
And yeah, it's really.
So Matt's going to send a thank you note also.
And
But
and
for
some
not
people
from the
to
board.
occupy chairs.
It's really, but just glance over this when you get a chance.
That's great.
Very impressive.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Facilities.
Well, we met, I'm sorry, was that last week, Muriel, early last week?
It was on the 6th.
And I went outside the room, so I didn't see all the papers that were at the table, but we're getting close to deadline. And I think that we gave some feedback, and there was one more feedback loop that needed to happen. And I just saw some designs there. Muriel, do we now have
Oh,
Are we still waiting on anything from them?
or we had three major things that we discussed, and that was the high school parent and student drop off. That needs to be sort of reworked. And we thought that Mr. Chetty is up in that parking lot so much that we're gonna wait for his opinion. And he's,
You were sick that day, Mike.
they're going to.
I'll show you.
And then the high school bleachers layout, and the gymnasium things. They're going to have another meeting on that with JB and John and Stelz and Mike Chuddy. And then the auditorium is coming along pretty well. They're going to remove the first two rows in the auditorium to give more pit room in the auditorium. We still have to, things still have to be fixed out, but not before it goes SED, like the chairs and things like that. This is, and then the schedule for the project, on the 1st of December that will be taking to SED. And then we should hear back from them by mid-January. Then in a few weeks after that, we'll go out for bids. And that'll be to the mid to, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because I wrote it down, mid to the end of February. Then 4 to 6 weeks in March, we'll open the bids. And the end of March, we'll award the bids. And that's that part of it. And it's too early yet to talk about the phasing, because they still have a lot of work to do with that, but they're certainly on top of it. And what do you think?
Well, I think that here's my question for the district. Did you guys meet with, we should have asked JB when he was in the room. Did you get the feedback on the seating yet? You guys still have to do that?
We'd have to check with Andy. We put Andy in charge of that, so.
Okay, and then
That's the auditorium seating you're talking?
yeah, the auditorium seating, and maybe we worked out we decided maybe the crosswalk needed to be moved forward just like a couple feet, and I said I didn't need to see the designs. I presume that our designers figured something out there, but did we get anything back from them?
No, we haven't given them that feedback yet, but I came down the next day to watch the pattern, and you're absolutely right. I think where they had placed it on the drawing is useless. So moving it into the middle or closer to where that sidewalk is, and again, remember, this is an alternate. So bidding would have to be really favorable for us to get to this alternate. But if we were to get to it, I think we have a much more improved design than we started with. So, and in terms of the seating, we're actually, they gave us two proposals. They gave us, because we are replacing the bleachers and we are refinishing the floor, we have an opportunity to potentially slightly rework the gym where all the seating would be on one side versus the other, and give us the ability to set back the seating from the court, which there's not a lot of room there right now. That's one possibility. Or leave it the way it is and start our seating a little further back than where it is now, to still give that buffer, but to have some seating on the other side where we have a student section and have some. And so we're just getting some feedback in terms of what would be in our best interest.
But ultimately they're working really hard to make that December 1 deadline. And I think that at least from what they need from us to make that deadline, it was just those two very small items of feedback left. And so I guess one from the facilities, and then you'll let them know that we probably need to bring that crosswalk in, and that's it. We've had
contractors. In fact, we just passed one this afternoon here. Some of the HVAC engineers have been in this last week looking at a closer look at the elementary school and here as well. So they're kind of refining their design, at least to the point where it would have to be submitted to SED. Some of the finishes, our architects aren't that worried about. That's not something SED cares if you got red seats or yellow seats, and those kinds of things can be determined later on.
So they don't think we're at risk for the December 1 submission deadline, but there was a little bit of concern on the turnaround speed in terms of how fast that would come back from the state. And it could affect our bid timeline, and we really won't know until February. So,
Well, you know.
We'll know by mid-January.
Well,
well,
that's, again, kudos to Chris and Matt who wrote the letter to SED, and in the letter that they responded, they did, pen a commitment. So as long as there's no extenuating circumstances in terms of, an abundance of questions or concerns, if they stay on that commitment, we would be looking at mid-January for a return. And then,
SCD doesn't care what color the lines are gonna be on the
No,
floor.
no.
Or what kind of, what color chairs we're gonna put in the auditorium.
no, but they could be asking us about ventilation in the middle school and it will hold up the high school.
Well.
Yeah.
I
I think we have to, in
Keep our
somewhat,
fingers crossed on this.
well, and trust that our architects do this
Yeah.
fairly regularly and have some sense and a working relationship with SED that I'm sure things go back and forth, and we're going to be hopeful that they've done a due diligence.
Before long, we'll look back on this. It'll be done. Chris, you were going to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think if it does go out to bid sometime in January to February, which is, it sounds like that's the schedule. That really is a favorable time for bidders. So it's hopeful. I would say it's hopeful. So hopefully things will work out in that favor. And it's a good opportunity. So,
And
I was very optimistic when I left that
Good.
meeting. They seem to be optimistic.
Good. I think we got a team of board members on it. So
Where are you guys getting the feedback for like the bleacher configuration?
For what?
The bleacher configuration? Where are you
We
guys getting
talked it
feedback?
around the room, but we decided that the athletic department wasn't
Yeah,
represented.
JB,
We really needed
John.
there.
We,
Okay.
a few of them, JB, John, Stelz, Chuddy.
What
Yeah.
we're looking at is the impact to how they seat, right, during the game is really
I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I understand and I appreciate that the architects brought an alternative design, because the benefit of the alternative design is that it improves capacity in the overall gym. However, my sense is that the trade-off is that the side which we have the student seating and where the players sit becomes, I don't think, as practical as it is now. So, but we do want the people who use it on a regular basis to inform whether this is even something we would want to have a broader conversation about.
Yeah, because I believe that tradition of the student
I
seating
was-
is
that was-
pretty strong.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But taking away like the bottom row works just to give that, because that is people, I mean, when they're trying to do
Out of bounds,
and they're stepping around people's feet. I mean, that is tight, but
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact number.
They did point out that we don't have to extend the bleachers all the way,
Yes.
and although we typically do.
So the manufacturer of the bleachers now allows us some flexibility, where as they come out, you can actually stop a little earlier than where now we have to bring them all the way out to lock them in place.
Right.
Where if you can envision this, if you wanted to short the bleachers by a row, then one row just stays kind of compacted into the wall. So, and I believe because of the railings, we actually have some flexibility in terms of maybe the middle section doesn't come out even as much, because then we could accommodate some handicapped accessibility kinds of things. So better type of bleachers in general. And I don't want to get too far, there's the type of seating that people sit on, everything from just a wood bench to kind of a plastic seat. We're looking at doing something similar to what we have now. And then, how much room between each row. There's all these little things you can consider, but I think ultimately we're going to end up with something very similar to what we have now.
I have one question. In terms of the CM, construction manager, when do we know when the CM might want to present to the board some sense of phasing or?
We asked about that. They weren't sure yet. I
They're,
think they're just really focused on that December 1 timeline.
yeah, they have a variety of meetings scheduled between the two parties to try to get a sense for that. I think they're looking for some feedback from the engineering groups that are coming out. And this for being in the profession, there's a lot of work that has to be coordinated. I mean, we've got We got a lot of HVAC stuff going on at MED, but we also have floors, right? So,
My only suggestion is if we were to maybe at committee level offer some dates or say we would like a report by a certain date. It might be a.
Well, we have another meeting on the 7th of.
Yeah, we're gonna
December.
kick them on that as
Yeah.
soon as they've submitted their
Yeah.
designs.
Yes.
Okay.
and so we've scheduled the meeting on December 7th and I think we set somewhat of a expectation that at that point we would want some preliminary data on phasing. We're gonna have some work ahead of us to make sure that once we understand the phasing, what the impact on program is over the summers and where that impact exists and whether we can
Yeah, I mean, we could be looking at 3 building shutdowns.
It's
Yeah.
gonna be something to
you
schedule.
have a roof here, you have the
We might
middle
need to
school.
order more of that library furniture.
The two upsides, and again, not to belabor the facilities report, is that they're honing in closer on the design for the HVAC at the elementary school. And some of that design is starting to emerge. And, there's a limitation to the duct space above the ceiling. So what methodologies they had originally suspected they would use has changed a little bit and changed to a methodology that's a little less expensive. So they really feel that proposal is coming in very nicely. And the other thing of note is that the lintels at the middle school did not end up being structural.
Oh.
So they're cosmetic. So they feel that although there's a lot of work and they don't, my sense was they don't want to minimize that this is a cakewalk in terms of shoring and
Wow, that's
supporting to the extent that they originally thought was going to be involved is no longer the case. Not that it's an easy job for a mason, but it's not as complicated as they originally
That's
suspected, which
fantastic.
hopefully correlates into some cost savings because there are some other places that, as you know, Chris, once the estimators at the construction managers got a hold of it and sharpened some of their estimates, some things came in a little higher than than the architect's estimates. Overall, I don't think anyone had a sense at the table who was responsible for these numbers feels that we're too far away from feasibility, but we're still in the game. And just the variables in terms of the bidding climate and escalation based on inflation are just things that we just won't know until we go out.
So we'll at that meeting, we'll find out the right timing, Chris, to come talk here. It'll be before January. Before we expect to go to bid, right?
This just occurred to me, but maybe in the spring, we as a board might want to think about somehow engaging the public in terms of like what to expect, whether that's
after the bids come back.
Yeah, no, but I meant in terms of the disruption.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking and how we get that message.
That's a good
out.
point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anything else on facilities?
Nothing. Muriel, did we miss anything?
No, I think we're fine.
Okay, Finance Committee, pretty much, our meeting was reported out by Mr. Chetty. Is there anything else, we should add on that or? All right, so, may I have a motion to accept the consensus agenda J through L?
Motion. Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Brings us to future agenda items. Do we have anything for future agenda items? Okay. And now we're at second public comment. This is the one where we ask people to stay focused on what was discussed at the meeting. Do we have anybody for public comment?
For the record, earlier we had 5 people connected.
What do we have now, Sal? Anybody?
3.
Anybody in virtual land wanna?
Not yet.
Okay. Anything you want to add? All right, the board does not see a need for an executive session this afternoon.
Nothing has to open now.
With no public comment, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.